Sup, man? In this JavaScript and HTML programming lesson, you can learn how to build a basic web application that captures keyboard input and allows you to access the properties of keyboard events. This is especially handy for game programming and interactive applications, but the ways you can apply it are completely up to you and your imagination. And in the very next video, we will expand upon this programming to show how to add conditional logic in order to perform specific tasks in a web application according to specific keys being pressed by the user. Let's first take a look at the finished product of what we are building in this video tutorial. So if I press down on, say for instance, my Q key, and I hold down, it says key pressed is Q, key code for Q is 81, and the down event fired for the Q key. Now if I release my Q key right now, it changes to the up event fired for the Q key. So I'm showing you guys how to listen for the down and the up event for any of the keys that people press. And I'm also showing the key code, which is very handy in case, for instance, somebody presses enter. It's not going to give you a key label that's pressed, but you do get the key code, so that way you can access the space, control, shift, and know what number that represents them in the key code. That way you can program conditional logic against these key codes if you don't want to use the actual key that's pressed. So you see, each key that's pressed gives you a key code. Okay, so that's what you're going to learn how to build in this video tutorial. The first thing we'll do is start with a doc type declaration. That way it works in all browsers: Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, Chrome. See, those are the ones I've tested in. And I had to make sure I put the doc type in for Internet Explorer, or it was one of the browsers that required the doc type. So just make sure your application has a doc type. And the first thing I'm going to do is pop in two headings. You can see it says JavaScript capture keyboard input example. If I render that to the page, you'll see what it gives me. Basic HTML stuff. On the next line down, I'm going to type in key pressed colon and then a span element. I'm going to give the span element an ID of KP, short for key pressed. Make sure I close that off. Then go down one line, just put in a break tag. Then we're going to type in key code, and this is where we're going to show the corresponding key code for the key that was pressed. So we can just copy that span tag or that span element, and we're going to call this one KC, short for key code. And then the last thing in the HTML is going to be a paragraph element with an ID of status. And inside of this element, we're going to change the inner HTML, the text that it has in it, just so we can see a status of what's going on. That's the one that you saw showing the key up and key down event changing. Alright, so that's all the HTML. Now we can go above the HTML and put in some JavaScript. And you might have your head tags and all that stuff in place. Script type text JavaScript. And then we'll go down a couple of lines to make sure we close off our script tag. So the first thing in JavaScript is we're going to access a listener of the document. So document.onKeyDown. This is one of the events that we can listen for within the document, and we're going to make that equal to a function that we want to fire off on that key down event. So let's open up our curly brace, go down a couple of lines and close off our curly brace, and in between the parentheses for the function we're going to type in event. And you might sometimes see that represented as a simple E, but I'm going to represent it as event because that's what it is. So within this function, in the first line, we're going to create a variable that has a name of key press. And this is how we're going to show ourselves the actual character that was pressed. To do that, we use the from char code function, and we give it an argument of event.keyCode. And the key code, you saw the numbers that were being generated as I was typing the keys in. That is the key code. So you can use the from char code to render out what key was being pressed, and then you put string before that to make sure it's rendered as a string. Now the next variable that we're going to need created is a key code variable, and that's going to be equal to the event.keyCode, which is the actual number for the specific keyboard keys. Now the next two lines that we're going to put in JavaScript are going to be for targeting these spans by their IDs, KP and KC, and we're going to put key press, the value of key press, and the value of key code into them. So these two lines right here do that. We say document.getElementById, KP, its inner HTML is equal to the key press variable. And the same thing for the KC, which is the key code variable. Now let's put something in place that affects this paragraph tag and changes the inner HTML inside of it to let us know which event is firing off. So right under this line, these next two lines take care of that. We say var status is equal to document.getElementById is status, which is this paragraph tag. And then we say status.innerHTML is equal to down event fired for whichever key that was pressed. Now, since you understand all the logic of the scripting that's happening inside of that, I'm just going to pop in the onKey up listener and its function right here. And very similar things are happening inside of that one, except we don't need to show again in those fields what key was pressed. We just want to show in the status which up event just fired off. Because actually, let's just go ahead and run it and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So we run this in the browser. If I hold down the T key, it's going to say down event fired off for T. But if I let go of the T key, it says up event fired for T. So that's why we put the onKey up listener and the function in there. That way you guys can program, if the need be, to listen for when the user lets go of the keyboard key. But for most applications, you would just use the onKey down event. Okay, so we've explained all of this code very in-depth, and in the next video tutorial that's going to follow this one, what I'm going to do is add conditional logic to this so you can listen for specific keys being pressed. Maybe you're creating a game that you want to have listeners for the WASD keys to move things around up, down, and side to side that are on your page. Maybe that's what I'll show how to do in the next lesson, is target the WASD keys. You can also target the arrow keys. You can target any keys you want, and you can do anything you want within your page that JavaScript is able to handle. So we'll see you in the next video lesson. Bye bye.